The family of a black man who was beaten and paralyzed by some Maryland police officers is filing a federal civil rights lawsuit.
But I'm also
Demonte Ward Blake was left paralyzed from the waist down and suffered a broken nose after the police dragged him to the ground and he landed on his neck during a traffic stop in 2019. Blake's family says there needs to be policy changes in Prince George's County Police Department after consistent reports of excessive force by officers. Renee Ward, Demonte's mother, believes officers need to be held accountable for their actions.
Had his knee, that police had his knee in my son's neck. My son was already paralyzed, swinging like a rag doll. And they walked around trying to cover up their names and badges and stuff. But like she said, they always want to say the bad things. Oh, they smell like weed. Or they did this and that. That's not an issue. People are still human at the end of the day.
Amen, amen. Say that.
Y'all don't say the good things that these people is out here doing, but you don't say the bad things that the people that did these things to these people was out here doing either. You know, and that's what really pisses me off about a lot of these cases. Oh, they was on the corner doing this. It don't matter, they're human. If they wasn't out there shooting up, bang, bang, robbing people, stealing and killing, so what if they did what they did? But they still was not bothering nobody at the time when the people that destroyed these people's lives and these family lives did this.
One of the officers involved, Bryant Strong, was charged with second-degree assault, misconduct in office, and reckless endangerment from the incident. Malcolm P. Ruff, the Blake family attorney, now joins me from Baltimore. Malcolm Ruff, thank you so much for joining us here again on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you, Brother Ray. Again, it's a great honor to be back with you guys. I appreciate you all allowing us to highlight this very important case. I do have to say the photograph that I just saw, I know for certain is not Officer Strong. He is a white officer of the Prince George's County Police Department.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to get into our conversation with. And some viewers who are consistent watchers of the show may remember you from last week for your federal lawsuit against Prince George's County Police Department and the work you're doing there. And we talked a little bit about black officers, white officers, but you all are making the case that although this particular officer is a white officer, this is an institutional and systemic failure of Prince George's County. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes. Our lawsuit that we filed today is a comprehensive indictment of the Prince George's County Police Department and their condonation, they're allowing, almost facilitating, and in some instances, you could even argue that they encourage this type of brutality throughout their police department. There are dozens of instances of police brutality that are listed in this massive lawsuit, 40 pages just of hatred, racist acts, unconstitutional acts, and very much sincere violations of constitutional rights of citizens of Prince George's County. This lawsuit is going to hold this municipality accountable for what happened to Demonte, because that condemnation, they're facilitating excessive force throughout the department in a widespread manner, is what led to Demonte's demise. It's what led to him being maimed. It's what led to his spinal cord being flattened and him being declared a permanent, nearly complete quadriplegic for the rest of his life. He lived for 653 more days in what we would describe as living hell. And that's why justice needs to be brought in Prince George's County to his family and to the community.
One of the things I'm curious about, Mr. Ruff, is this idea of lawsuit against the Prince George's County Police Department and the municipality of Prince George's County. But I'm also looking at your lawsuit and seeing that you're naming Bryant Strong individually. Do you think the individual component will be a more useful deterrent for law enforcement officers who violate? Because I presume otherwise it's just the municipality or the department on the hook, and that individual officer, if they're not facing any criminal charges, don't hold any liability.
Well, legally, we have to be able to prove that this officer used excessive force in order to pierce the veil that municipalities have in federal court and their immunities that they have. One immunity that they do not have is if they have a pattern and practice of unconstitutional behavior throughout their department that they are not addressing. And so in order for us to pierce that veil towards direct liability of Prince George's County, it's going to be necessary for us to prove that this officer committed an act of excessive force, meaning an unreasonable use of force under the Fourth Amendment. And so it is absolutely necessary for us to sue this officer directly. I do believe it does have deterrent effect because the allegations in this complaint are damning. We allege that this officer intentionally slammed Demonte on his face so hard that he broke his C4 neck bone in half. Those are the types of words that I would never want to be on the record of my life. And certainly there will be a warning to anybody who's potentially thinking about hiring this gentleman who's been charged with criminal charges for what happens to Demonte. This absolutely is necessary to hold both the municipality and the officer accountable for what they've done to this family.
Mr. Ruff, I'm anticipating what a defense attorney in this case would say or what they may even try to argue. And it seems as though the outcome would be heartbreaking for everybody when you begin to talk about spinal damage and whatnot. But to prove intent or maliciousness, to prove a violation of one's civil rights, that seems to be at least a step too far. And I can anticipate how defense attorneys may come and say that was never the intention, despite that being the outcome. And that often tends to be one of the places where we who see things on video and it looks so obvious to us find that our understanding differs from the justice system. How do you all anticipate being able to overcome that?
Well, we really are talking about two different courts, right? We're talking about the criminal case and the civil case. In the criminal case, the state's attorney's office in Prince George's County is going to be faced with the hurdle of proving that this officer did intentionally injure Demonte. However, the devastating nature of his injuries are overwhelming, and there is no accident about the nature of his injuries. And I think that the state's attorney's office will be able to prevail based on expert testimony, based on the eyewitness testimony that will come out in this case. And then when we go over to the civil case, we're talking about a different standard. We're talking about an objective standard that is not viewed in 20/20 hindsight, but how would an objectively reasonable officer handle this situation based on the totality of the circumstances? So if we look at the facts of what happened to Demonte, he was handcuffed behind his back and being searched up against a squad car when he was slammed to the ground. There was nothing about those circumstances that made Demonte an immediate threat to anyone. So the use of force, taking him to the ground in the manner that he was taken, while he had no ability to protect himself or to catch his fall or to stop himself from having a catastrophic injury and being made an invalid for the rest of his life, there's nothing reasonable about that. And I believe a jury will absolutely be able to see through any potential defense that the county may try to assert or the officer may try to assert. This was unreasonable, point blank, period. And it's every Black mother's worst nightmare.
Now, Mr. Ruff, you hit a word that all of our listeners here have wrestled with so often, which is objectionably reasonable. Because the things that feel objectionably reasonable to us, often as we find both in criminal or in civil court of laws, aren't always objectionably reasonable. So what type of framework, and I forgive me if I'm asking for your game plan as an attorney, but what type of framework would you approach to make something that seems demonstrably and objectively reasonable, perhaps to myself and the panel that'll join us in a second, make it seem so reasonable to judges and or juries?
Well, that type of evidence really will be left up to very, very qualified experts in police use of force, police conduct, and police administration. There is an expert, Michael Graham, who has weighed in on Prince George's County and the way they operate, their administrative policies, and how they are not followed. And that's how the group of officers who came on your show, I believe 2 years ago from Prince George's County, were able to prevail upon the county in their case. In this type of case, we would use a use of force expert to show what training these officers would have received and what their training would have dictated in this type of situation. And I believe that we will be able to show evidence from a very qualified expert that there were no set of circumstances where his training, Officer Strong's training, said to throw this young man on his face like an animal in the street. And honestly, I think it's high time that the objectively reasonable standard shifts. And I think that we're seeing that shift throughout the jurisprudence all across this country. We're seeing tenets like qualified immunity start to crumble from their foundation. So I understand that the term objectively reasonable is really a sore spot for our community. But I think that with the actions that we take in the advocacy community, in the legislature, in the courtroom, that innocuous term is shifting into the favor of justice.
I'm going to go to my panel in just 1 second, but before that, one last question, as briefly as you can answer this, Mr. Ruff. What is the relationship between a civil case and a criminal case? Does one have to proceed before the other? Is there evidence or information that may be presented in one that can be used in the other? What is the relationship in that situation?
Well, I can't say exactly what will happen in this case, but I can tell you that it is commonplace for the federal district courts, which is where we filed this lawsuit, and the judges on those benches to oftentimes put the civil case on hold in order for the criminal case to resolve, because there doesn't want to be the courts don't want to allow any prejudice to occur to the defendant in the civil case. So if there's a pending criminal case while a civil case is going on, that could potentially create certain prejudice in the public sphere for a potential defendant. So I think it's more than likely that the criminal case will be resolved prior to the civil case being moved along. These civil cases take quite a long time, and they are very expensive. And we're dealing with a county who, in a recent piece of litigation, spent nearly $26 million defending a case that had ultimately settled for $2 million. We're hoping that the county will be much more judicious with the resources of the county in attempting to resolve this case in a manner that shows its humanitarianism, but also shows what real justice is.
This seems like a place where even those who may be fiscal conservatives would want to see better behavior from the police, because it's costing our local jurisdictions so much money.
Back roll my uncle's video in just one moment.
Time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punching!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?